happens when you get two sounds that have very similar frequencies. So they may look the same, but they're just a little bit off. Maybe you have a 440 hertz and a 442 hertz. What happens is that you get areas of destructive interference and regulars of constructive interference. And the constructive interference, if you think about it, occurs at a very regular period of time. So you get this area where you don't really hear anything, and then you have this area where you do hear something. Right? So if you look at that, if these areas of constructive interference and these separated by areas where you hear nothing. So it's called a beat frequency, and it's what musicians use to tune their instruments. So the bigger apart the beat frequency is, the more of these you hear every second, and you can't distinguish them, okay, because they're so fast. So like, for example, if you played a note that was 440 and 540, the beats would be 100 beats every second. It would be hard for you to distinguish those beats, but it would sound horrible. It would have this brassy metal sound. It would sound so bad. So when instruments are in tune, they want the beat frequency to be 0. Right? When you play the exact same note at the same frequency, you should be playing together so it sounds like one note that's exactly the same, completely constructive interference. No beats in it. So as we tune instruments, we listen to see the lowest amount of beats we can get. So 2 hertz isn't that bad. I mean, you could hear that. You could actually hear the wobble in the 2 sounds, but they would be fairly, it's 2 every second. That's what you're hearing. Wah, 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 like that. And you could hear that. But when it's really far out of tune, it sounds awful. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about something called resonance. Resonance is due to the fact that objects that have a crystalline structure tend to want to vibrate at natural frequencies, because objects that have a crystalline structure, if you look at their atomic structure, they have a repeated atomic structure that looks the same, and the atoms are connected by chemical bonds that act like little springs. So we know that springs, because of the material that they're made out of, their spring constant, tend to want to vibrate at some natural vibration. And that natural frequency, if you can make those atoms vibrate at that natural frequency, then that will produce and induce a vibration in the spring. And when all of the springs are vibrating at the exact same rate and frequency, then they constructively interfere, and that's called resonance, and it sounds like a louder note. One extreme example of that is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So let me find that for you. And I don't really care that you hear any of the verbiage on this, but I do want you to watch it. So in the night. So in the 1940s, what happened is they built this first suspension bridge in Tacoma, Washington. And as they were building it, within 3 months of, during the building process, they noticed that it was wobbling, that the road was vibrating. And it was vibrating along on either side of the yellow line. So if we watch this, you can see it was pretty significant. And they actually had to shut it down. And so it turns out that what was happening is that as wind, so here's our suspension bridge here, okay? Right, our suspension bridge. If we looked at it from the side view, okay, these ropes this way, so I'm trying to draw it somewhat sideways. We had wind that was trying to flow past the support beams, And it didn't just flow past it. It actually would curl around it in a vibration called eddy currents. And when the eddy currents matched the natural frequency of the material that the bridge was made out of, here's the center line, here's the road, and you had this thing kind of vibrating up and down like this, back and forth, like this. It was super, super dangerous, and it actually, the materials couldn't withstand that. And because the materials resonated, they started vibrating. The natural vibration of the wind created constructive interference, and the new amplitude was so big that the materials failed and the bridge fell down. Very famous example. Ended up in the process of testing construction using scale models and wind tunnels to simulate the wind type conditions in the area to see if they could, prevent that from happening. It wasn't really strong winds, it turns out. It was just normal winds. And like I said, when wind goes around a beam like that, it doesn't just smoothly go around it. It goes off in eddy currents. And they go off at a certain rate or frequency, which invoke that resonant behavior of the bridge. And then another example, another phenomenon that all waves experience is something called the Doppler effect. So when a wave is approaching you, let's say it's a sound wave, if it's not approaching you and the object is making sound, then the waves are going to be equally spaced. Okay, they're going to be equally spaced on either side. And you're going to hear if you're over here or if you're over here, right? Doesn't matter where you are, the wavelength is the same of the wave. And so you're going to hear the same frequency, which is the note that you hear. Frequency defines the note of the wave. But when the object is moving, because waves are sound waves in particular, compression waves, you're going to compress the wavelength on the front end. Okay, so the wave is going to be compressed. So the wavelength is going to go down, and that's going to make the frequency be higher. So you hear a higher pitch or frequency. And when it goes away from you, okay, it's the opposite. The wavelength gets bigger, which reduces the frequency, so you hear a lower pitch or frequency of a note. So it sounds like this, like that. And the same thing happens in light. Light, as it approaches you, the wavelength decreases, which increases the frequency, and it shifts it towards the higher frequency light, which is blue light. We call it blue shift. When you're on the back side of it, the frequency goes down because the wavelength goes up in size, and so it is red shifted. Light is red shifted towards the red end of the spectrum, the lower frequency end of the spectrum. We use this to determine that if we look at all the objects around us in space, that they seem to be traveling away from us because the light from them is red shifted, and they're traveling very fast, right? And they're traveling away from us at high speeds, which shifts the speed, the color of light from their spectra that they emit towards the red. When something's coming towards us, if it would be shifted towards the blue. So what we will be doing later on is we will be talking about beat frequency and Doppler shift, and we'll actually talk about calculating those.